Hello, my name is Rachel and I'm the sewing pattern designer here at Kutch and Bloom. And if you would like to make a memory bear or sew a teddy bear, then this tutorial is for you. So I'm using this pattern, which is Betsy Bear, and the link to buy the pattern is just below this video. And this is the Betsy Bear that I will show you how to make throughout this tutorial. I'm going to follow all the steps as they are laid out in the sewing pattern, so you can use the pattern and the video together. When you've bought your pattern, on page 1 there's some useful information, so have a read through that, and then on page 2 there's a full list of notions, so you'll know exactly what you need to sew your bear. And then after that there's a description, and then there's the pattern pieces. So you'll see they've got a solid black line around the outside. Do cut around that solid black line, and then what I do is I stick my pattern pieces onto a thin cardboard and then cut them back out again. So I use the cardboard because it gives the pattern pieces a bit of solidity. So I'm going to then draw around them onto the interfacing, and they won't bend or flex because they're stuck onto the card. So I use a pizza box, which is a really nice solid sort of a card, but at the same time it's thin because you need to be cutting around these curves and you need to get the curves nice and accurate. So pizza box or cereal cardboard is ideal. You'll also see one more point on this, that there are holes in the arm and the leg pieces. Do cut those out, because that's how we're going to attach the arms and legs onto the Betsy Bear without your bear being jointed. So it looks jointed, but it's not actually jointed. So if I hold this one up, you can see how they are standing proud of the body, the arms, and the same on the legs. So that's because of those holes and how we're going to attach them later on onto the body. So the final point before I start the tutorial, you will need a good quality interfacing, and you'll need one with these 3 qualities. You need it to be medium weight, iron on and woven. So I use this one, which comes from Empty Bobbin, and the link to buy is below the video. It's code EB8028, and other people have had success as well, I know, with Pellon SF101. Whatever interfacing you use, you will see that on the reverse of it, it has got glue dots, and you want one with such tiny closely packed together dots that you can't even see where they all are. You can just feel them with your fingers. And because it's there, because you've bought one then with loads of glue dots that are really tightly packed onto the fabric, that means you'll get a really good adhesion when you iron it on. So the iron's going to melt that glue and stick it onto the back of your fabric. If you don't have a good adhesion, later on when you turn your bear through, the interfacing can rip away, and that will just make your bear look not as nice. So a good quality interfacing will give your fabric structure. It will stop it from stretching, which is really important if you are using any stretchy fabric or stretchy clothing to make your bear, and it will stop your fabric from looking bumpy or puckered. So I think I've told you everything. Let's begin. So what you're going to do once you've cut all your pattern pieces out is you're going to draw around them onto the interfacing. So I've just drawn these pieces to start with. This is for my face. You can see it says face cut 2, 1 reversed. So I've got one is this way, and then for my second one I reverse the piece, so I'll flip it like that. And I've drawn around both. But what I also need to make sure I do, because this will help me later on, is I need to make these markings. You see here it says G and it says H, and there's these dashes that go to the edge. You just want to mark those 2 on. And just put them there for now, and then transfer them onto the inside of my drawn line. There we are. And then I'm also going to draw my eye hole. Let's just put the pen through here. And has that worked? Yes, I'll just darken that a bit. There we go. And so you're going to do this for all of your pattern pieces. So read how many pieces you want, check whether any are reversed, and put on any marks like these are here that go to the edge of the fabric. The edge of the pattern. When you come to drawing around the arms and legs onto your interfacing, here's the arm. You can see it says cut 2, 1 reversed with the hole cut out, then cut 2, 1 reversed with the hole not cut out. What this means when you're drawing on new interfacing is you need to lay your pattern piece onto your interfacing and draw all the way around the outside edge of your piece and also draw inside the hole for once. Then for your second piece with the hole cut out, turn it over, and then you can see I've drawn it by here with my hole drawn as well. If you look at the top of the arm, it's got an asterisk here. Do put that on the top. It's kind of obvious which is top and bottom of arm when you're looking at the pieces with the holes in. It's not so obvious when you're looking at the pieces with no holes. It can be a bit difficult to work out which bit's which. So then you've got your two with the hole not cut out. So you've just drawn all the way around the edge of your fabric. Do not draw inside this hole. See? It's a bit hard to see. It's a little blurred. But anyway, I've got the outside edge here with my asterisk at the top, and then I'm going to flip it for my last arm, and I'm going to put it by so, or I originally put it by here, and then draw all the way around, and don't do the hole. But do remember to do your asterisks at the top so you can see which is which, okay? Same process for the legs. So cut 2, 1 reversed with the hole cut out, then cut 2, 1 reversed with the hole not cut out, and then draw around all of your other pieces of interfacing, following the directions on each, and I'll show you what to do next. Once you've got all your pattern pieces drawn out onto your interfacing, your next step is to cut them out. So these are paws, and I'm going to cut out here with a margin all the way around the edge. Just cut up here. So there's no need to cut exactly on the edge of the pattern piece at this point in time. You'll do that later once you've ironed it onto the back of your fabric. So I've laid my interfacing pieces out onto my fabric. This lovely fabric is a fat quarter pack from Tilda, and if I just come along, this stage is important because it really affects what your finished bear is going to look like. So I've got the coral with blue on it is going to be on the tummy because I think that's a really nice warm colour to have on the tummy area, which will show a lot. My inner arms and legs are on this yellow, but you can see how it tones, so they'll look nice because they'll be right next to each other. I've picked a plain chambray again from Tilda for the face pieces because the eyes will show up well against the plain background. And then my muzzle and back of head I've done in this fabric, and I'm going to do the back of the bear in this. My paws I'm also going to make with this fabric because this point and archway here I think will look nice on the paws, and I like to have the front ears the same as the paws. There's a nice sort of bit of matching that goes from top to bottom of the bear. And then finally my outer legs and outer arms and my back of ears I'm going to do with this lovely mustard, and it's got quite large figures on it, but there's plenty of room on the Betsy Bear pieces, so I can use all of these pieces and show off how pretty this fabric is on the arms and the legs. So I'm just going to quickly show you before I iron these on. We're currently looking at the back of the fabric. You can see the difference in colour here. And I've laid out my pieces of interfacing. The glued side of the interfacing will stick onto the back of the fabric, and I've carefully picked which parts of this design I want on each piece of this bear. So these are quite large images, but there's loads and loads of room on the legs and arms of Betsy Bear. So just choose where you want everything and then iron. So having ironed all my interfacing onto all my pieces of fabric, I've roughly cut it out, and next I'm going to cut very carefully and neatly all around the edges. And here's one that I've just cut out, so you can see I've managed to get the lady there. There's plenty of room around the edge to sew this piece to the other leg piece later on, but without losing the piece of design I wanted. Sewing the muzzle. Now if you have drawn around your pattern pieces using a biro, your darts are not going to be very deep. I used a biro initially. This one
and then realised the darts are not as deep as they ought to be according to the pattern, so I've gone back in with a fine liner tip so I can draw right into the points, and therefore I've got a more accurate representation of what the pattern should look like. Step 1. So pin the first of the darts with the fabric right side to right side. So I'm going to start with my top dart here, fold my fabric in half, and now you need to put one pin to secure your dart. There we are. And then, as it says in the pattern, you want a second pin by point B. So if I just lay this onto here, I can see where point B is, and I'm going to use a second pin there. Once you've sewn this a few times, you can eyeball it, but just for starting, that's how you do it. We're going to take our muzzle piece across to the machine, ready to sew this first seam here. What we're going to do before we start is make sure the machine is set up correctly. So move your needle position so that there is 5mm between where the needle is going to go through the foot and where the edge of the foot is. So if we have 5mm, which is very similar to 1/4 inch, between the needle point and the edge of the foot, rather than worrying about the gauge here, which shows us seam allowance sizes, we can purely sew along the edge of the foot. And if you've got a clear sewing machine foot, you can easily see any curves. Now we're going to sew the first dart. I'm going to put the needle down into the fabric. I've not started right on the edge of the fabric, I'm just a little way in because I need to do reverse stitches at the beginning of this seam to stop it coming unravelled, and then I'm going to sew forwards. When I sew forwards, I will therefore be sewing from the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to come off by where the green pin is so that we can tie off those threads rather than doing a reverse, because that's a bit stronger. So here's my reverse stitches to start. Pop the needle back down into the thread, down into the fabric, and now we're going to sew forwards. Remember, we're sewing along the edge of the fabric, the foot's on the edge of where this fabric is. There we are. So we've come off the edge of the fabric, lift the foot up, pull your project away, whoops, there we go, and then snip here. So we've got our long ends of thread here. We're going to pull our pins out, pop them to one side, and then we're going to tie this thread here. It's a bit difficult to do with the camera in the way, but there we are. Round we go. So just tie, pull the thread nice and tight, and then tie again. I'm going 3 times for luck here. There we go. And then we're just going to snip this excess fabric away from the seam allowance, and we'll also cut through these extra dangly bits of thread as well. So there's my scissors. So snip the threads, and then just cut the excess fabric away. And now we'll repeat for all of the darts on the muzzle. So I'm just going to show you one more dart just in case you didn't catch the process. So fold your fabric right sides together, pop a pin in to secure the dart, pop another pin in then where it shows you point B on your pattern piece. So that will be there. Push that in. So I'm going to put my fabric under my sewing machine foot here, just a little way in from the end of the fabric, so I can do a few steps backwards. There we go, and now we're going to sew forwards so we come off by the green pin here. There we are. Lift your foot up, pull your fabric away, so you've got some decent long pieces of fabric, of cotton, snip, and then we're going to tie off these ends. See if I can do it here to show you. So just get the pins out of the way. That may make life easier, wouldn't it? So just tie these 2 threads. Again, really difficult to do with a camera in front of me. Be easier for you. Tied once, tied, twice, tied 3 times, and then get all 4 bits of cotton off to the side, and we're going to just snip away the excess and just cut away the extra fabric away from the seam allowance. We're cutting away this extra fabric from our seam allowances. I could take a little bit more off this one, because that means that when we attach the muzzle onto the face, we'll get a smoother line rather than the seam going bump, bump, bump over all of these. So I'm going to just sew up these last 3 darts, and then I'll show you how to attach your muzzle into your face. Now you've sewn your muzzle, all your darts are there. Flip it, turn it through like this, and you can see it's curved. That's ready to become the front face, the front of your Betsy Bear's face. Now we're going to move on to the face pieces. Now they're going to be sewn together, right sides together. So fold one on top of the other. At this point, just double check that you have marked, as shown on the pattern, G and H, these 2 dashes, and also the eye hole there, and that you've done it on both pieces. So what we'll do now is we're going to pin all the way along this seam. There we go. A couple more pins just to make sure the edges stay together correctly. There we go. We'll be sewing from here to here, C to D. So as we did before, we're going to start with the sewing machine needle, a small way in from the edge of the fabric. Pop your needle down into your thread, a couple of stitches back. Now sew forwards to the end, and then when we get to the end, we'll do a couple of reverse stitches just to secure this seam so it doesn't come unravelled. There we go. Take your fabric away from the machine like so, snip your thread, and then we're going to cut the excess fabric away from the seam allowance here, just like we did with the darts. To show you this with the pattern pieces, we're attaching the top central dart, i.e. the one that's directly above the bottom dart, to C of the face, and the bottom of the muzzle, point E, will be pinned onto point F of the face. So if I put these out the way, here is my fabric. So hold it the way you know it's going to look when it goes onto your bear, and then put them together. Flip it upside down, as usual. Super fiddly due to camera in the way, but can you see where these 2 seams are meeting here and here? Pop a pin in. Pop a pin in like so, and then F will be pinned to E round here. Oopsie. And round the other side, F to E here. And now we're going to pin all the way round from here to here, and from here round to here. So lots and lots of pins. That one's not quite straight. I'm going to tidy that up in a minute. All the way around. Now you may get a little bit of excess fabric. If that happens, that is because they need a little bit of extra fabric so that the muzzle can push out from your bear's face when your bear is made and stuffed. Let me tidy this pin up. Oopsie. It's a bit better. So when that happens, all you need to do, move a couple of pins and just repin so that the extra fabric is even. See here, I've got this all extra bit here. That's absolutely fine, that's meant to happen. So I've got a couple of pins here, a couple of pins here, so I can find out where the middle is. And just hold it on, pop a pin in to secure. There we go. Maybe I'll move these a little. So you just feed it around, get it nice and even. There we are, another little pin in here. There we go. And then one by here. Lovely. And one in here. There we go. So again on the other side then, so that's the central pin. I'm pinning down the other side of the face now. Pop a pin there, pop a pin there. This is EF, this pin here is poked into. There we go. Find the sort of, maybe do a couple more pins and then find your middle. Pin. Pin. There we are. Now you can see where you are in terms of extra fabric. Pop a pin here. There we are. Whoopsie. Let's not stick pins in our fingers. And then here. See, all that extra fabric is just sort of disappearing into the curve. It's not an issue. You just need to take your time and make sure it's nice and evenly done, so you don't have a lumpy bumpy bit at some point. And then we got this bit, last couple of pins. There we are. See how my extra fabric is just sort of here and here, so it's quite evenly distributed. You're not going to have one big bumpy bit. And then if I just wriggle around a bit, push it with my hand, and we're so nearly done. Nearly time to sew this together. Pop. And this one. There we go. And there. Oops. There we go. There we go. Let's put another pin in here. There we are. So we have pinned all the way from EF round here up to C and the central dart here round to EF here. There are lots and lots and lots of pins. That's absolutely fine. So we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we'll sew from here all the way around to here. So I'm just going to move this a little bit to make it easier to sew. There we are. And pop this under the foot of your machine, and same routine as we followed before, a few reversing stitches and then come all the way around and then a few reversing stitches on the other end. Getting towards the end of the seam now. If you find the curve is a bit too much for you just to feed it through with your fingers, what you want to do is pop your needle down into your thread, lift your foot, give it a little adjustment, and then you can continue sewing. There we go. We are right at the end, a couple of reversing stitches. Lift your foot, pull your fabric away, snip your cottons. So now we've sewn this seam to sew the face to the muzzle, we're just going to pull out all the rest of the pins, and then you want to take the excess fabric away from the seam allowance just to the bottom either side, so that's by point EF. So it's my scissors, just snip away here, make sure you're not cutting through your threads, and then here snip away. And if I turn it through, you can see my face is taking shape. I've got a couple of pin marks here. I'll just put a little bit of water on them and give them a little press with the iron to get rid of the pinholes. Then I'll show you the craft eyes. So I've got rid of my pin marks. I'm going to turn my face piece over, and you've got these dots that you put on earlier where your craft eyes are going to go. So just cut a small hole, there we are, and then cut again if you need to, and again if you need to, there we go, and then turn it over. There's your hole. Get your craft eye and push in through here, out through the back, give it a little wiggle if you need to. Oops, there we are, and then just put the back on and repeat for the other eye. I've put both my craft eyes in, they're both in position, both got their backs on, and next we're going to make the ears. So place them into pairs if you're doing different fabric front and back, and I'm going to do these on the lower part of the screen. They're going to be my front ears and these are going to be my back ears. So just do one pair at a time and put your front ear onto your back ear, lay them exactly on. You're going to pin round here and then you're going to sew round here. You're going to leave this bit here, the straight line at the bottom, unsewn. Pop your ear underneath your sewing machine foot, put your needle down into your fabric, do a few reverse stitches, and then we're going to sew all the way around. As we did with the muzzle, if the curve is too tight for you to easily guide the fabric around it, put your needle down into your fabric, lift the foot up, there we are, and keep going. Needle down, lift the foot, and sew again. I've sewn all the way around the ear, so you can see there I've left the bottom straight edge open. A couple of reverse stitches now. Pull the ear away from the sewing machine, cut your threads, and then we're going to trim the excess fabric and stuff. So cut all the excess fabric here away from your seam allowance, all the way around. Got an extra little thread here. Snip anything like that because you don't want it to show when you've made your last, when you put your bear together. So there we are, one ear sewn all the way around the outside and trimmed, and then once we've sewn the other ear, we're going to turn this through so the right side of fabric is facing outwards, and then we're going to put a little bit of stuffing in the top of it. So once you turned your ear through, just run around the inside of it, make sure it's all turned round, so you've got as smooth as curve as you can make. I use my stuffing tool, which is just a plastic chopstick. Then you want to put some stuffing up inside the ear. You're not stuffing the whole ear because you need to leave enough room for enough fabric to be able to easily sew it in between the front and back of head. So push it all in, hold it so the two raw edges of ear are lined up, and then pop a couple of pins in. These pins are just to stop the stuffing from drifting out of position and getting in the way whilst you're sewing. There we are. And repeat for your second ear. Once you've stuffed and pinned your ears, take some time just to sew along the bottom of each ear, one at a time. I do this because it can help the next stage when you put it between the front and back of head to have a neater result at the end. I have in the past sewn ears into bears and the fabric has slipped whilst sewing through front and back and two sides of ear fabric, so 4 layers of fabric plus interfacing. It can all easily slip if you're not careful. And then what can happen is you can have a raw edge showing and then you've got to try and repair it after you've made your whole bear. So take the time now, just sew along the bottom of each ear, one at a time. So the next step is to sew your ears onto your front of face. Now these are the fronts of my bear's ears, and I've chosen that I want them to match the paw pads just because I like what that looks like in a finished bear. You can choose to do yours however you'd like. So here is our bear's face, and on the face you can see there's the markings G and H. So pop pins where those are on both sides of your bear's face. So if you turn it over, you can't see now, but there were marks. I had drawn marks and I've put the pins where the marks are so I can clearly see where the ears are meant to go. Now I want the side of my ear fabric that I want to face forwards to lay against the side of my front of face fabric. That means after it's sewn in position, when it pops up, it'll be this way round. See? And my ear is going to be sewn between these pins. So lay it on to start with, like so, and then you want to pin it into position. This is easier to do from the other side, but I would do it so that you've got, as you go round, those stitches that you just did with that raw edge, have them slightly showing above the edge of the face fabric, because that means then when you've put your bear together, this raw edge will definitely be sewn into your seam. Next you're going to sew the ear into position on the front of face. You are not going to use the regular seam allowance here of 5mm or 1/4 of an inch. You're just doing a hem that will just run right next to the edge, the raw edge of the front of face fabric. This hem will be hidden out of sight when you attach the front of head to the back of head in a minute. So this is, again, it's just about holding the ear in position, and it's all about making sure that your finished bear looks neat and that it looks professional. Just gonna use quite a long stitch length for this. A couple of reverse stitches to start, and then along. So you can see just a little seam there, just to hold this ear in position. I'm going to snip these loose threads off here and then sew the other ear as well. So these two seams are now sewn to hold the ears into position. I'm going to keep the pins in the ears just for now until after I've attached the back of the head to the front of the head. Our next stage then is to sew the two back of head pieces together. So you can see on the pattern piece we've got J and I. So turn your back of head pieces to their right sides together. line them up nice and neatly together, and I have marked a little dash where J is, and I'm just going to pin from J up to I. So I'll sew from here up to here. We're returning to use our normal seam allowance now of 5mm or 1/4 of an inch. There we are, sew all the way to the end by I, and then a couple of reverse stitches to secure. Snip your thread and snip those bits as well. So there's your back of head pieces sewn together from I to J. We're going to leave this part open because this will make it easier later on when we're putting our head inside our body, because we'll have a lot more room to sew the neck seam, but you'll see that later on. The next step is to pin the front of your Betsy Bear's head onto your back of your Betsy Bear's head. So you are going to pin the top central seam of the face, which if you look at your pattern piece is D, and you're going to pin that to the top of your back of head piece, which is I. So D to I. So carefully line these two seams up and then put a pin to secure. And then looking at the back of head, this here is L from your back of head piece. That is going to be pinned to the bottom corner of the face, which on your pattern piece is shown as K. So put a pin there. Now I find this easier to do from the back. You need to make sure, now you're going to put pins all the way around these two raw edges to hold them together. You need to make sure that your ear, when you get to the ear piece, you can still see this raw edge of the ear. Well, it's not raw, is it? We've sewn it, but you know, you need to make sure you can see that. Again, we're thinking about making sure on our finished bear that you can't see this edge. So pin all the way from here round to here. And one other thing you need to do is you will probably find you've got a bit of fabric left over. So just as we did when we pinned the muzzle into the face, just ease that fabric round and go around, repin, rejig, make sure it's perfect. Once you've pinned this side, pin this side in exactly the same way. I have pinned now all the way from the top central seam round to the bottom, and then the other side top central seam round to the bottom. So this, according to your pattern pieces, this is DI and this is KL and this is KL. What I'm going to do next, rather than sewing all the way from here all the way around to here, I'll get a much better result if I sew from the top centre down to one side, remove my fabric from the sewing machine, and then start again and do a second seam from the top centre down to the bottom corner. This is because as you sew, when you go over the thicker pieces of fabric, no matter how careful you try to be, your machine will do a little bit of a wobble. So if you sew from here round to here, what will end up happening is one of your ears will have a bit of a dip on the fabric next to it, and you'll have an uneven looking head. So top to one side, start again, top to the second side. So this seam is now sewn from top central round to one side, and I've removed my fabric from my machine. I'm going to just pop the sewing machine needle across, put it back under, and put my needle back down into my fabric and sew again. As you sew around your head and the other curves of Betsy Bear, what you will need to do from time to time is just lift your sewing presser foot, turn your fabric a little bit and pop it back down just so you can continue nicely with the curve. A lot of these curves are too tight to be able to just move the fabric with your fingers, so you will need to just stop, put your needle down, lift your foot up, little pivot, pop your foot back down, and then continue sewing to the end. So now we have sewn our front of head and back of head together. Both sides are sewn. We're not going to snip the excess fabric away from these two bottom corners. We'll keep those in position as they are because they will help us to line the head up into the body. So fully sewn, and you can now turn it in the right way. And here's my Betsy Bear's head, and you can remove these pins now. They've done their job and they've kept the stuffing in position. There we are. Next we can go on and sew the body. Next we're going to start assembling our bear's body. So if you have slightly gotten in a muddle about which are the tummy pieces and which are the back pieces, the tummy pieces are a lot bigger than the back pieces are. Also on your back pieces you will hopefully have marked Q and O, these two dashes here, which we'll be using in the next stage. But for now, pop your back pieces out the way, come to your tummy pieces, and if I just show you with the pattern piece, we are sewing now from M to N. Sorry, just get that into view. M to N. So it's as shown by the dashed line. Put your two tummy pieces, right side of fabric to right side of fabric. There we are. Line them up nicely. You're going to pin all the way along here, and then you're going to sew all the way along here. So I've sewn my bear's tummy together from M down to N, so M down to N, and I have cut the excess fabric away from the top here, but I haven't cut it away from the bottom. That's because we're going to use this extra bit of fabric here that will be on both the front and the back pieces to make a really neat junction. I'll show you that once we've sewn the back pieces together. I'm going to show you the next step in a slightly different order to how it is in the written pattern. The written pattern says to sew the two back pieces together from O to P, but instead I think it's a little clearer right now if I show you for this video how to do the guide stitches first, then we'll sew the back pieces together after. So on your back pieces you'll see that there's a letter Q and a letter R, and on one of my back pieces here I've just put a pin where Q is. Now these guide stitches that we're going to sew next, and we will do them on the other back piece as well, these guide stitches are going to be sewn exactly the same distance from your raw edge as your other seams are, so 5mm or 1/4 inch. You're not sewing these two pieces together at all. You're going to first sew this bit from here to here, then sew this bit from here to here. These guide stitches are ready for once all of your bear is sewn and your bear is completely stuffed. When you come to stitch it up at the very end with your closure stitch, which is called a ladder stitch, you'll be able to use those guide stitches and then you'll get a really nice, neat finish. So, guide stitches. Pop a pin at Q on each of the two back pieces and we'll sew them one at a time, just there to there. Then I'll show you the next step. So you've got your two back pieces and you've sewn your guide stitches on each. So they are still separate at the moment, just with the guide stitches. So put your two pieces of back together, right side of fabric to right side of fabric. Just line these up. There we are. And if we turn it, you can look on the back pattern piece, it says P and O, and I have got the line there at O, so pop a pin in there, pop another pin at the bottom, there we are, and maybe another pin in between. Make sure it's all going to be nice and neat when you sew, and then we are going to sew from here to here. Let's sew the bottom of the bear's back 2 pieces together. A few reverse stitches to start. Off the edge of the fabric and reverse. There we are. Pull it away from the machine and give it a little snip. So our back piece is sewn together from O to P at the bottom. The top we're going to leave open like so. We've got our guide stitches. Next we're going to sew our back pieces onto our tummy pieces. So to do this, if I just flip them over, you'll be able to see that these are now a mirror image of each other. We are going to sew this bit to this bit, this bit to this bit, this bit to this bit, etc. Now this is a bit difficult to show. It's quite easy to do in real life, but trying to do it with a camera between my eyes and my hands is quite difficult. But if I just open up the tummy piece like so, there we are, so the right side of fabric's facing upwards, and I open up the back piece and I put it like so, so that the holes are next to each other down each side. And then you want to pop a pin up at the top here to hold these together. And on the other side, pop a pin to hold them together. And then we will come down this side and put some more pins. I will add more pins and make sure these edges are neat in a minute. I just need to show you this first, and then I'll neaten it up after. So this is just to give you the general gist of what's going on. Around the other side, a couple more pins here and here. There we are. Now let's show you the bottom. This is why we left this fabric here and here on the ends of our seam allowances. What we're going to do is we're going to nest the seams. This will give you a really nice neat join. This is something that they use in quilting. So the excess fabric of this piece, we're going to have it pointing that way, and the excess fabric of this piece, we're going to have it pointing that way. So hold it flat with your fingers, put them next to each other, and then if you just slide them towards each other, you'll feel that fabric lock up at the point where the seam is on each piece. So if I just do that once more just to show you. So this excess fabric is pointing this way, this excess fabric is pointing that way. Hold those in place with your fingers, put the raw edges next to each other, and then slide it along so it locks up. There it is, and put a pin through that seam to hold it. That way you'll get nice neat right angles at the base of your bear. There we are. And now I'm going to go all the way round and I'm going to pin all around here, and I'll just repin these sides so they're tidy. So I've just rearranged all my pins now, neatened them off, got plenty more in, so I've pinned all along the straight edge of the bottom of the bear, the straight edge up the side and the straight edge up the tops, both sides. And you'll see I've not pinned around these curved indentations because we're not sewing those. Once we've sewn these bits that are pinned now, I'll show you, these will then become the holes that we will sew the arms and legs against. This is starting to take shape now. It's not completely done, so you can see over on this side I've sewn here, and I've left the indentation for the arm. I've sewn down the side here, I've left the indentation for the leg, I've come all the way along the bottom there, that's done. So now all I need to do is this side, this top piece, and I'm done. So now we've got these two tummy pieces are sewn to the back pieces along the side seams. So you can see here, this is where I've sewn and this is still pinned. On the other side, I've just started to remove the pins and I've snipped the excess fabric away from the top and bottom of the armhole. And then if I come around to the leg hole, I've done the top of the leg hole here, and I'll do the same round here. Just take out the pins, then just do a little snip just to get the excess fabric away. And that will make your life a bit easier when you come to attach your arms and legs, because these will be smoother to sew around. Now you've sewn the side seams and the bottom seam of the body, turn your body through so the right side is facing outwards, the right side of fabric's facing outwards, and you will see you've got these holes. There's two this side, two the other side. This is where you're going to attach your arms and your legs for your bear. So if you hold the body like so, you can see that when you put this here, it fits. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin this in position all the way around here, and then we're going to sew all the way around this hole. Just a further point, whilst I'm continuing pinning around this hole, make sure that your arm is definitely round the right way, because you'll remember that the back, we've got these guide stitches, you can see those there, and the arm curves forwards. Because we're pinning right side to right side, and we shall then sew right side to right side, the arms and legs need to be on your bear the correct way round. So with the arms, make sure that they're facing towards the tummy. When you sew the legs, make sure that they are facing the correct way so that your bear will be sitting down. But we'll cover that bit when we get to it. So all my pins are there. I think I'll push them in a little further so the bumps at the ends of my pins are not going to get in the way of my sewing machine feet. There we are. So all pinned round, and now I'm going to take it across to my sewing machine. Bring your bear's body and arm across to your sewing machine and put your presser foot down again so it's sitting against the edge of the fabric. So in this case the presser foot is sitting against the raw edge of the hole, and then put your needle down into your fabric, and then you're going to gently sew all the way around the hole. Now this is a really sharp curve, so each time the curve gets too much for you to keep the presser foot against the edge of the fabric just by moving it with your fingers, you're going to stop, put your needle down into the fabric, lift your presser foot, slightly move your fabric, pop your foot back down, and then continue sewing. So do this slowly and carefully. You also got plenty of pins in the way, so just be really careful now that you're not going to break your needle and you're not going to lose the flow of the curve. I've sewn most of the way around my bear's armhole. I'm just going to finish off now. So I've been sewing really slowly and carefully. Each time I've needed to change the angle of my fabric a bit, I've been putting my needle down into my fabric, lifting my foot, pivoting the fabric slightly, popping the foot back down, and then continuing sewing. Just going to sew the last little bit here. There we are. So if I take it out from underneath my machine and snip, and I'll just show you. There we are. So the hole the sewing has gone all the way around the armhole, and then I've stopped here and I've made sure that my beginning and end of my stitch here have overlapped each other. If you leave a gap here, you'll end up with the stuffing coming out of it later on when you stuff your bear. When I sewed the first inner arm onto the body, the light was shining onto the edge of my presser foot, so it was a little bit hard to see. So I'm just doing you a quick demo using the second inner arm, hoping you can see the edge of the sewing machine foot here, is sitting against the raw edge of the fabric here. So if I pop my needle down, re-angle my fabric, I'm hoping that's really clear. The edge of the foot is on the edge, the raw edge of the fabric of the armhole there. Now we've attached both inner arms, we're going to attach the inner legs. Remember when we put the arm on that we made sure it faced in the correct direction for how it will be once your bear is completed. We're going to do the same with the leg. So here's your bear's back with the guide stitches at the top. This is therefore your bear's tummy, which is the plumper side, the back is thinner. So the leg is going to need to be, pop your arm up and out the way. The leg is going to need to be like so, because your bear is sitting. So the foot of your bear is on the tummy side of the bear and the toes are pointing upwards because your bear is seated. If you were to sew your leg like this, your bear would be standing. But this bear is supposed to be sitting, so it goes like so. You can make it standing if you want to, but the shape of the body, it doesn't particularly lend itself to a standing bear, this particular one. So what we're going to do, as with the armholes, is we're going to pin the raw edge of the leg around to the raw edge of the body, pop pins all the way round, and then we're going to take it across to the sewing machine. So I have sewn my first inner leg on all the way around. I've made sure my stitches overlap here, and then as with the arms, I've cut these little cuts all the way around between the raw edge and where the line of stitching is. Be really careful you don't snip through this line of stitching. This is just to allow your fabric to curve nicely. If I turn my bear over, you'll be able to see I've started pinning on the second leg, and I've made sure that this leg is laying exactly over the other leg so that my bear is going to sit up straight and he won't be wonky. And just one more thing I wanted to add, make sure the lower edge of the leg is running at a right angle to the side seam of your bear, and that will make sure that your bear is sitting up straight. I'm going to pin all the way around here, stitch all the way around here, do the little snips, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to attach the outer arms. Now that we've sewn on both inner arms and both inner legs, we are going to follow through the steps to start attaching the outer arms and legs to the inner arms and legs. What you need to do, get one of the arms to start with, push the longer part of the arm in through the hole, push it all the way around, push all of it in, there we go. Now turn your bear over and you can see there is your inner arm. So what you want to do next is pin an outer arm to the inner arm. Remember how we had the asterisks on the tops of the arms? Work out which of your outer arms has the asterisk at the top, and when it sits on the inner arm will be the correct shape. This is my correct one, and now we are just going to pin all the way around the outside so that the raw edges of the two arms are together. So just pin all the way round. You may need, as you get to the top, to rearrange your pins slightly and even out your fabric slightly. So I've pinned my outer arm onto my inner arm all the way around. I'm just going to pop the last couple of pins in. Make sure as you're doing this that you use quite a lot of pins around this top curve here. This curve here is quite a big wide curve, as is this curve, but this one's quite small and you don't want your fabric to shift when it's under the machine. Double check as well that you haven't accidentally pinned the top part of your bear's body into this into the arm by mistake. You don't want it to all get caught under the machine. So then we're going to take this across to the sewing machine and sew it together. Same as with the armholes, same procedure. We're going to sew all the way around. We'll sew 5mm or 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the raw fabric, and we're going to make sure that our stitches, that the end of our stitch line goes slightly overlapping with the beginning of our stitch line, so that we don't have any gaps when we come to stuff later. So I'm now sewing my outer arm to my inner arm fabric. My seam allowance is 5mm or 1/4 of an inch away from the raw edge of the fabric. I'm just going to sew all the way around. I'm just coming up to the final part of stitching around the arm now, and as before, when the curve becomes too curved for you to be able to easily move your fabric just by moving it with your fingers, then just keep popping your needle down, raising the foot, there we are, lining your fabric back up and then keeping going. These threads here are the from the beginning of this stitch around the edge of the arm, so I'm just going to keep going with my line of stitching just past where the beginning of my stitches were. There we are. So when I pull it away from my machine, you can see the line of stitching is unbroken. If you'd left a gap here, your stuffing will come out of here later when you stuff your bear. Now that we've sewn all the way around the arm, we need to just snip into the curves. So I've started doing it here with pinking shears. So these are pinking shears. They've got the blades that have got little triangles all the way along, and you just cut next to your line of stitching. But be very careful you don't snip through your line of stitching. If you haven't got pinking shears, you can do it with scissors, and you can just go snip, snip, snip all the way around the arm. Again, be very careful not to go through the line of stitching, but that is more time consuming. So whether you use regular scissors or pinking shears, you need to go all the way around the whole arm. Once you've done that, sew your second arm in using exactly the same technique. So outer arm pinned to inner arm, and then sew round, snip the curves, then I'll show you the legs next. Next, we are going to attach the outer legs to the inner legs. So it's a very similar process to how we did the arms. So when you look at your bear, if you turn it so your right side of fabric is facing outwards, the right side of the body fabric, you'll see the leg here has got the wrong side of the fabric showing. So what you need to do is, as you did with the arms, push the leg fabric, the inner leg fabric, through the hole. Turn your bear through the other way. Mind the arm out of the way, so you can pull this leg through the hole like so. Straighten it all out. Now we're going to pin the outer leg fabric here to the inner leg fabric here. If we look at our pattern piece, the top of the toe here is marked as S and the heel is marked as T. So we will be pinning this outer fabric to the inner fabric. At the top here at S, pop a pin in. Oopsie, there we go. And at the bottom by the heel, we'll pop a pin in by here. So this is marked T on your fabric. And then we're going to continue pinning down here and all around here. We're going to leave this side open. So if you look at your leg pattern piece, you can see there's a dashed line here to show that this is going to be sewn. There's no dashed line here. We're not sewing this bit. Okay, put your pins all the way around, then we're going to sew. Place the leg fabric under your sewing machine foot and put the needle down into the fabric. And as with other seams on this bear, we're going to start with a couple of reverse stitches. And then we shall sew one more. There we are. Now we'll sew forwards, and this will be the same process then. We'll sew all the way up here, round the back, down to the heel at T, a couple of reverse stitches to finish, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. As I've sewn around the curve of the leg here, my stitches have gone a little bit wonky, so what I've done, I've drawn a little line here to connect up one line of stitches with the other line of stitches and to bypass this little wobble here. So I'm just going to sew along here now with my machine so that I've got a nice properly curved row of stitches, and this won't impact the appearance of my bear. So I've sewn now from S at the top round to T at the bottom, all the way around, and that little wobble line in my stitches I have sewn across here to bypass the wobble so we won't get a pointy bit on the back of the leg there. Once you've sewn all the way around your leg from S to T, cut the excess fabric away from the end of each seam. So away from the top here by the toes, and away from this bit here by the heel. This will mean that when you sew the paw pad on in a bit into this gap that you've left here, the seam will be able to run around more smoothly. And then we're going to clip the curves. Don't worry about this bit here, this straight bit that's the underneath the leg. You just want to go round here, round here and round here, and again either use scissors or use your pinking shears, whatever you need to do, just to allow this fabric to curve easily when we stuff our bear. Once you have snipped the excess fabric here and here, and you've clipped these curves, it's time to go to the second leg and follow exactly the same set of steps. So push the inner leg through to the other side of the fabric, pin on the outer leg, sew all the way around, leave this bit open, and then we'll be ready to go onto the paw pads. Attaching your bear's paws. Before you start pinning your bear's paws onto your bear's legs, just check that you've got them marked up correctly. So the paws are egg-shaped, so the top is narrower than the bottom. There's a wider curve at the bottom and a sharper curve at the top. Okay, and when you flip them over, just check you've put the markings. So if you look at your pattern piece, it's U at the top. Just check you've got your lines here for U here, and it is V at the bottom, and check you've got the lines here for V. Now we're going to start pinning our bear's paw pad onto our bear's leg. So looking at your paw pad like so, remember it was egg-shaped. At the very top of the paw pad here, the thinner part of the curve, or the less wide part of the curve, this is U, and we're going to pin it onto the top of the bear's leg, which is point S. So it's U to S. So this U is going to this S. So easiest way to do it is push these pattern pieces out of the way. Let's open the leg up. And there we are. So this is our right side of our fabric. Get the right side of your paw pad, and this little line here, you're going to line it up with the seam and put in a pin. Okay, so that's U of the foot pad is pinned onto S of the leg. The raw edges of the fabric are together. Now, probably easiest if you put a pin or two either side. Leave about 1 centimetre or so's gap between pins, maybe 1/2 inch or so. There we are. So there's the top of your paw pad pinned into position. Now we're going to turn it round, and this is V at the bottom of the paw pad. So remember, this is V and this is T. We're going to do exactly the same thing with V. We're going to pin this little mark here onto where the seam is, like so, and place a couple of pins either side. Same sort of a distance. There we are. One there and one there. And now I'm going to pin all the way from these top pins round to these bottom pins. If my fabric needs a little bit of adjusting, which it may well do, I'm just going to move my fabric just as we did whilst pinning the muzzle, just as we did whilst pinning the bear's shoulder. Because you're pinning curves, it's easy enough for things not quite to match up first time round. So you just need to adjust your fabric and go back round. As I've started to pin round, there is a bit of additional fabric, it looks like, on the leg compared to the paw. So what I'm going to do is just find the middle of the gaping bit of fabric and put a pin there. And then do the same again, sort of push this around until it's evenly spaced. There we go. And I just need to put more pins here and here and on this bit here that wasn't yet pinned. One thing I meant to say to you is on your first row of pins, because you're going to put 2 rows of pins into this before you start sewing, you need to be putting your pins with the paw fabric facing upwards, facing you, and then you're pushing your pins down into the paw like so, and then the next pin will go down into the paw. When we've gone all the way around, I'll show you what happens next. So we push our last pin in, the last of our first row of pins, so it goes down into the paw pad like so. And if you look, I've now pinned all the way around. What we're going to do next is turn the bear's paw and leg like so. So now the paw pad, instead of facing you, is facing the table, and we are going to pin in between every single one of our first row of pins. Now just be wary, because the fabric can be not quite lined up. So as you put these pins in, just make sure that the raw edges are lined up. If they're not quite right, slightly move your pins. So a pin in between every single one. And what this does is this means that if you just sew from this side, if you just sew with 1 row of pins, look at what happens on the other side. You can get this sort of slightly bumpy effect, and that can lead to a not particularly sharp line around the edge of the paw. So instead, what we're doing by putting this second row of pins is we're just checking that these raw edges of fabric are exactly lined up, which means that our leg paw seam will look super neat. So a really good paw pad is one of the things that will make your finished bear look extra good and extra professional. Okay, so I'm going to carry on now. I'm going to put a pin between every single one of these pins. It is time consuming, but it is really worth it. Okay, this is my paw pad fully pinned. So for all the pins that are pinned from the paw through to the leg, there are pins in between them that are pinned from the leg into the paw. It does look a little bit crazy, but honestly it's really effective. I've used so many pins here, I've run out of my glass headed ones and had to use my more basic metal ones. But once you've done this stage of your paw pinning, it's now time to sew this on the machine. Now that your paw pad is fully pinned, you need to bring it across to your sewing machine. So you want to sew it with the flat part of the paw itself, flat against your sewing machine. So turn it like that. The leg of your bear is here, it's facing away from the machine, and the paw pad itself is on the machine. And then with the same size seam allowance as usual, so 5mm or 1/4 inch, line your sewing machine foot up with the raw edge of your paw, put the foot down, pop the needle in, we're going to sew very, very slowly and very carefully all the way around here. There are a huge number of pins here, so if you try whizzing round, you are going to break your needle. So just very slowly and gently. There we are. And round you go. Each time that you the paw gets more curved, do exactly the same thing we've been doing on other stages of this project. So put the needle down into the fabric, raise the foot, turn the fabric, put the foot back down, continue sewing. This stage is going to take you quite a long time, but it's really worth taking your time. After you've sewn your bear's paw pad, you'll see that you've got a nice neat line of stitches all the way around, and at the top here you can see this is where my beginning of my stitching and my end of my stitching has overlapped, so there isn't a gap. And I'm just going to take all the pins out now, and then I'm going to clip all the way around the edge of this paw pad so that it curves nicely. So I'm just taking out the last couple of pins here, and then either with your pinking shears or with your regular scissors, we're going to cut all the way around here. Again, make sure you don't cut through your line of stitching, and there we are. Just be really careful as you go around. You need to go close to your stitch line, but don't cut the stitch line. Okay, so all the way around there with your pinking shears, or do little snips with your scissors, and then sew your other paw pad, and then I'm going to show you how to finish your bear. So now that we've sewn our paw pads and we've trimmed around both using our pinking shears or made little snips, the whole of our bear's body and arms and legs is all sewn. Now, as you're looking at this now, you can see the wrong side of the fabric is facing outwards. If I turn it over, you can see inside of the body, this is the right side of the fabric. So if I just put this to one side, when you've completed your bear's head, hopefully you've turned it through. If you haven't, turn it now so the right side of fabric is facing outwards. And what we're going to do is we're going to drop the bear's head inside the body and then pin, so all along the neck seam. So of your bear's head, this is the neck seam here at the bottom, and of your bear's body, this is the neck seam at the top. So turn your head upside down, put it into the body. There we are, and then we're going to pin a couple of main points before we pin everything else. So first of all, this is the back of the bear's head, which is W here. We're going to pin that to the top of the open back of the bear. So here is your guide stitches, remember. This top piece above these, this is the letter R. So we're pinning W to R. Like so, and the same on the other side. So this is W, this is R at the top of our guide stitches, so just pin, and then if we look inside our bear's face, this is the bear's muzzle, this is the central dart. And if you turn it a little bit, you can see this is the central seam of our bear's tummy. So we're going to pin central seam at the bottom of the dart to the central seam at the top of the tummy there. For the next step, we've got our 3 anchor points in position here. So the open back of the bear's head and body, and the same the other side, and the central seam of the muzzle dart is pinned into the central seam of the tummy seam. What we're going to do now is we're just going to pin the tops of the arms out of the way so that they don't get caught when we sew our neck seam. So just fold it down, make sure you're not pinning this accidentally into the head fabric, you're just pinning it to itself so it's definitely out the way. And do the same for the top of the other arm. Put your hand in and make sure you've, there we are, pinned that. Next, we are going to pin the back of head seam to the back of body seam. So if you look inside here, you've got these two seams here. This seam here is the seam at the back of your bear's body. This seam here is the one that joins the muzzle to the face. So ignore this seam, look at this seam, and if you look at the bear's body, then this is where your bear's back is sewn to your bear's tummy. So we're going to nest this seam, this to this. This is so that you get a nice straight line up the side of your bear's body and into the side of your bear's head. So push the excess fabric of one bit in that direction, the excess fabric of the other bit in the other direction, put them near each other, just as we did for the body at the base. Push them along until they feel like they've locked together, and then put a pin through those seams. There we are. Now we're going to do the same the other side. So if we look, we've got these two seams. Remember, this is your central dart seam, the central bottom of your face seam. So this seam here is between your muzzle and your face. This next seam is the one that we're looking at, and it's the one that's nearest to the back of your bear's body. So again, push your excess fabric. If you maybe push this bit in this direction, that bit in that direction. So remember, opposite directions to each other. Push them together. Bit fiddly. Push them together. Push them along until they feel like they've locked up together. And put in a pin. There we are. Now let's go back round to this first side that we started with, and we're just going to pin all the way along the raw edge of your bear's neck seam, and you are going to make sure that your raw edges are lined up nicely, and just put pins in all the way along. There we go, and here and here. There we are. So that's our bear's back of head is pinned to our bear's back of body, and then come round a little bit, and you're going to pin between this central dart pin all the way around to this side of head pin, continuously checking that our fabric's lined up nicely. You don't want your bear to go a bit wonky at this point because you've sewn so much. There we are. Now let's just check it. Turn it over. That's not quite perfect. Look, this piece of fabric here isn't quite in line. So I'm just going to re-pin that piece. I might pin it from this side actually, just to be sure. There we go. And then we're going to repeat for the other side of the muzzle and the face and the back of head, all around there, and then we'll take it across to the sewing machine. This is my line of stitching along my bear's neck, and I finished it as I started it with a few reverse stitches. Now I'm just going to pull all my pins out. Ouch. Try not to stick them in your own fingers. Along we come. And once they're all out, remember to take those pins out that were holding the arms out the way. So two of those. Now we're on to our last two seams of this project. So turn the head through like so. So you're looking at the back of the bear, and you are going to, first of all, put a pin to pin this neck seam of this side to the neck seam of this side. Again, nest your stitches as we have done all along. Pop a nice pin in. There we go. And pin all the way up to this seam that we sewed at the top of the back of the head. I'm going to put a pin there, just so I know if I sew up to this pin, I'll have definitely overlapped my stitching, so I don't have a hole. And pop pins all the way down here There we go. Two more. Whoops, one and two. So we are going to sew from the neck seam, not from any lower, from the neck seam line up to here. So I've just sewn this last seam at the back of my Betsy Bear's head. So I have sewn from the neck seam here, which is RW, up to the back of the head here, which is point J. So that has therefore completed this initial line of stitching here, taking it down to the neck seam. The next thing you can see as you look along the back of your bear is your guide stitches either side. So they were running from R to Q. So just below Q, pop in a pin, and then we're pinning, if we use our back piece to remind us, we're pinning this bit from Q down to O. So if we look at the bottom of our bear's back, this was where we stopped stitching the bear's back earlier. So this is O, so pop a pin here, and then you want a line of pins all the way from here up to here. We're not pinning this bit. This bit that's got your guide stitches either side, this is your turning hole, okay? You can leave that a bit bigger if you want to, especially if you've got very bulky material, or if you're just a bit nervous about how easy it's going to be to turn your bear through. So we're just going to pin all the way, oops, down here. There we are. I'll just pin that bit next. I'm just coming to the end of my line of stitches. I'm going to stop at the yellow pin here. There we are. Now I'm going to do quite a few reverse stitches here, because this bit here where your guide stitches are is going to be under quite a lot of stress, this piece of fabric, as you stuff, because there will be a lot of times where you're going to be pushing your hand and your stuffing tool in and out through this gap. So do quite a few reverse stitches down here to make sure this seam is going to hold and isn't going to burst open later. That was 15, that should be enough. Pull your bear out from under your sewing machine foot, snip your threads, and your Betsy Bear is now 100% sewn. Next, we're going to take all of these pins out, we shall turn it through, and then we're going to stuff it. We're now in the final steps of making our Memory Bear Betsy Bear. So your bear is fully sewn. The next thing we need to do is turn it through so that the right side of fabric is on the outside. I find the easiest way to do this is to pull the arms apart a little, push our stuffing tool, which in this case is a plastic chopstick, up into the arm, maybe wedge it against your body or something so that you can push it up into the inside of the bear, and then push it, there we are, out through the stuffing hole as one arm started. Get your next arm, do the same thing again, so pull the two layers apart, push it inside out like this to make a little pocket, push your stuffing tool, your plastic chopstick in, and push it up, 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 so that you go through into the inside of the bear and come out, there we are, of the turning hole as well. And now just keep pulling. Do this slowly and carefully. You don't want to rip anything or break anything, but it may well take you quite a long time. So just keep going. There we are. You could do the same thing with the legs, push them up, but I'm just going to keep going this way until my bear is fully turned through. I'm now in the very last stages of turning my Betsy Bear Memory Bear through the right way. And I'm just gradually working on pushing the inside out part of the fabric through the hole so it can gradually be turned. Here we go, there's an ear, and just push the last bit through. Watch your eyes so they don't get caught as you go through. There we are, and here we go. One Memory Bear Betsy Bear waiting to be stuffed. Now I'm going to stuff my Memory Bear Betsy Bear. I'm going to use a chopstick. You need a tool that is long and strong and that's got a blunt end, because you're going to pack your stuffing right down into the ends of the arms. You're going to pack your stuffing right into the ends of the toes. So you need something that is strong enough that it's not going to snap off, and you need it to have a blunt end so that it's not going to pierce through your fabric. The stuffing I'm using today, this is from Hobbycraft. It's this one, their soft toy filling. You can use any stuffing, but it does need to be a decent quality. Make sure it's not got any lumps in it or anything. So I've mostly stuffed my bear's paw pads now. As you can see, they are really round now. They're quite firm. I've got a little bit of an indentation here, so I'm just going to pop in a bit more stuffing just down into that corner, so still with little bits, and push it in. There we are, with the stuffing tool. So I'm going right down into that corner, and then a bit more. Stuffing your bear will take you quite a while, so set aside some time to do it. Put the radio on, or some music, or a podcast, and just push it all in. There we are. Is that better? Yes, that's better. So, yep, little bits of stuffing, pack them in firmly. Now that I've got my 2 feet done, I'm going to come up the legs next. So I've stuffed the majority of this leg. The other leg I've only done the foot so far. I've got a bit of a dip in here, so I'm going to put a bit more in. When you do stuff your Betsy Bear, pushing lots of stuffing up into these curves at the tops of the legs and at the tops of the arms will really help to give your bear shape. It's a bit better. I'll pop a little bit more in as well. But just to think, when you're making a memory bear, the whole point is that you're displaying clothing, that you're showing clothing that for you holds precious memories. So you want to get your bear to look as good as possible, so it's really showing that clothing off. If you're making your bear as a teddy bear instead, you don't need to stuff as tightly. You don't need to stuff as tightly if you don't want to. But by and large, for memory bears, the rule is stuff it, put some more stuffing in, stuff it again, pop some more stuffing in. Also, stuffing will break down over time, so if it is solidly stuffed initially, it will not be as solid. That's better again. It won't be as solid once time has passed. Once you've stuffed both legs, come on to stuff the arms. I've started to stuff here, the paw at the end of the arm, and I'm going to stuff in the same way that I did the legs, lots of little bits, and I'm going to make sure I stuff right up into the curve at the top of the shoulder here, and that will give you that distinctive Betsy Bear silhouette, and it will make your memory bear look as if it's button jointed, even though it's actually got sewn in arms and legs. Once you've stuffed your bear's arms and you've gone up into the shoulders, both sides, and they're all nicely curved, next thing is to stuff the face. Now you want, as you have done before, to use little bits of stuffing, little bits like so. Push them up into the top area of the head first. Once you've done that, then push all your stuffing, again lots of little bits, into the sort of darted side seam area of your muzzle first, and then fill in the centrepiece as well. As you're stuffing, you'll be able to feel what I mean. You can feel that the stuffing is going up into the top, and then you can feel that area will feel full, and then you can stuff this area. I get a lot of emails and a lot of people ask in the Facebook group, why does my bear's face look flat? It's just because you've not stuffed it enough. So providing you've sewed it correctly originally and you've got all your darts on and everything, the thing that will otherwise make your bear's face look flat rather than giving it the nice curve is that you just haven't put enough stuffing into this area. I've stuffed the top of the head now and I've started stuffing the muzzle, and I thought of one more thing I wanted to say, which was as you're pushing your stuffing in to the muzzle, push it in and up like this so that your nails and this part of your finger is against the edge of the inside of this fabric, and that will help you to push it right up into these darts so that you get a good shape around the front of your bear's face. The final stage of stuffing your Betsy Bear is to stuff the body. When you do this, make sure you stuff your bear with them sitting on a table or a desk. This way it will ensure that the stuffing goes in evenly, and as your bear becomes fully stuffed, he or she will sit up straight. The final stage of stuffing your Betsy Bear is to stuff the body. When you do this, make sure you stuff your bear with them sitting on a table or a desk. This way it will ensure that the stuffing goes in evenly, and as your bear becomes fully stuffed, he or she will sit up straight. Betsy Bear only has one hand sewn seam, and that's the one we're going to do now. Now it's a ladder stitch, which means essentially the stitch looks like a ladder. So you go either side, either side, either side, and we're using our guide stitches as guides. It is relatively straightforward once you can visualise what the pattern is. So I've got one long length of cotton here that I've done a little stitch through here, and then I've put both ends of the cotton through the eye of my needle, so I'm using a doubled up thread for strength. So here's my first stitch here, and I'm just going to dip in to one side of my seam and come out. There we are. And now exactly horizontal with it, because the ladder stitch literally looks like a ladder. So here's where this stitch comes out. If I hold it at a right angle to my seam, that's my seam, and then that will tell me where I'm going to put the needle back in. So just where that was. So here, dip in, come out, pull the thread all the way through, hold the thread again at a right angle to the original seam so I can see where I'm going to put my needle back in. I've now caught up with my guide stitch, so I'll just go there. So here's my needle going in, just on the outside of the guide stitch. Dip in and come out, pull my thread through, come across, again use my piece of cotton to work out where I'm going so it all stays at nice right angles. There we are. That's the correct place. So I'm on the outside of my guide stitches, dip in and come out, go across. I'm going to keep going. Can you see how these lines, they're forming the rungs of a ladder? So our guide stitches are as if they're the wood at either side of the ladder, and the stitches that we're forming here are as if they're the rungs of a ladder. And if you keep these stitches like really horizontal, so horizontal to the way your bear will sit, or think of it as at a right angle to your open seams, then that way these stitches will disappear. If you have your ladder stitch a little bit wonky, that is when, there we are, that's when you are more likely to be able to see these stitches afterwards. So dip in and come out. Make sure you're not going over that thread, you're just using it there as a tool to be able to see what you're doing. Come back across and dip in and out. I'm going to go here Another tip for getting a decent ladder stitch is to use a small needle. The smaller the needle you use, the easier it will be to take little tiny stitches either side of your bear. Now, I am normally able to do these stitches smaller than this. I would also use a matching thread, and therefore they would disappear better. But for the purposes of being able to show you right now, I'm using red thread, and because I've got the camera in between my eyes and the bear, this is being slightly sewn by guesswork. But there we are. Up we go. Nearly there already. So I'm hoping you're seeing the process. Let me just explain it once more. Guide stitches either side. Each time you take your thread and your needle, you put your needle just on the outside, here's the line, on the outside of the line, go down and up and pull it through. Come across at a right angle to your guide stitches and go down and up and pull it across and go down, whoops, down and away, there we are, and oopsie, it's getting awkward now, pull it across, and we're on the last couple now. There's one. Right, I'm going to have to do this off camera because the angle's too difficult. Essentially what I'm going to do, if I just put my needle there out of the way, is I'm going to use my little scissors and I'm going to very gently, not with them open, I don't want to cut my threads, I'm going to use these to pull each of these threads up one at a time. So starting where I started and go up, pull my threads till they're taut, i.e. until these two sides have come together, and then I'll pop a little stitch at the top and that will be that stitch finished. So I just put my cottons back through the eye of my needle, so I'm just going to take a stitch here right by the neck seam, dip down, come back up. I'll see if I can do it in a coloured piece of fabric so it won't show so much. There we are. Pull it through and get my scissors and just do a little snip right next to my fabric. There we are. If I just give this a little push and a scratch, there we are. The ends have disappeared. So the red stitches were just too messy for my liking, so I've taken them out. But this is just to show you that when you do a ladder stitch, really small little ladder stitches, using a thread that matches your fabric, they do disappear. So just take your time over them, and if they're not right, it's perfectly okay to take them out, start again. To complete our Betsy Bear, our memory bear, we are going to cut a nose out of felt using the nose template, and we're also going to make a tracing of the smile template ready to set it up to sew our smile onto our Betsy Bear. So get yourself some tracing paper or greaseproof paper, pop it over your smile template, and I'm going to just draw my smile template now. There we are, and I'm also going to do this bit here, the dashed line below and the arrow at the bottom. This arrow is going to show us where we're putting the smile template onto our bear. I've cut out my Betsy Bear nose template and I'm putting it onto my felt. I'm just going to pin it on with a couple of pins, and then I'm going to cut round it to make my oval shaped nose. When you choose your felt for your bear's nose, choose one that's either 100% wool or is a wool mix. If you use polyester, then it can go bobbly very quickly, which will ruin your finished appearance of your bear. I've cut the bottom of the piece of paper here by the arrow on our smile template. Now this arrow here, we are going to pin this piece of paper so that this arrow points into this junction here between the seam at the bottom of the muzzle and the seam that's the tummy. So place your paper on and push a pin in. There we are. Next, hold your paper so that this dashed line here is in line with the seam here and this top dart here, because this is going to make sure everything's nice and straight and neat. There we are. Put another pin at the top of the dash. Lovely. And then hold the paper up, put a third pin here. And hold the paper up, put a fourth pin here. And now I'm just going to push pins along the smile template a couple of millimeters apart. These pins will form my guidance as to where I'm stitching the embroidery thread to make my bear's mouth in a bit. So make sure they're nice and neat and push them in. There we are, here and all the way up to here as well. Now I've got my row of pins all the way along my smile shape here, and they're all evenly spaced. What I'm going to do in order to be able to remove the piece of paper but keep the line of these smiles is I'm going to, first of all, for the first few, I'm going to lift them up a bit. Don't pull them out the paper, just lift them up a little way. This will allow you to, if you pull your bear up a bit like this, pull the paper up and away from the muzzle and put a pin in. Can you see this part here? So this green pin here, this is the original pin, and if I pull the paper up, this is where that green pin was piercing the muzzle fabric. So I put a different pin there and I remove my original pin. My next pin is this orange one. So if I peel my paper back again, I can see where this pin, this orange one, had pierced the fabric. So I push this into that point and I remove this one. Keep going all the way along your bear's smile, doing this until you've got a row of pins and you can remove the paper. I've removed my piece of paper and I can see on my row of pins that a couple of them are slightly out of line. This one here is a bit high, so I'll just move him down a little. There we are. The rest look okay, I think. So just double check that these are in a nice curve before you go any further. To make sure my nose is pinned onto my bear in a nice neat way, I'm going to fold it in half long ways and push a pin into either end of this fold. There we are. So then I can make sure it sits on my bear's face in a neat way, and the top of the bear's nose is going to sit against where this dart finishes. So if I just put it there, so this pin here is showing me this is halfway around the felt, and I'm right by where that seam finishes. So push a pin in there, and then if I tilt my bear down and put like so, I can see that this pin is now in line with this. So I'm going to put another pin there. Have a little check, make sure it's all straight. Now if you just push a couple more pins in on that end and one that end, and then I'll show you how to do the embroidery to make your mouth. Cut yourself a 50cm or 20-inch piece of embroidery floss, and we're going to use this to sew along our smile that's been marked out by our pins. So first things first, take the pin out the bottom of the nose, put it to one side and lift up that felt, and we're going to push our needle in so that where it's gone in will be hidden by our felt. Pull up our first pin, come down through the muzzle until your until your needle comes out just where that pin had gone in, and then pull it through, pull it all the way through so that you've got left a tail of a couple of inches, or I don't know, 10 centimeters or so at this end, because this is going to be tied to the other end of this once we've sewn all the way along the smile. So from this point now, lift up a couple of these pins, and we are going to take our needle up and down through each of these pinholes and back stitch as we go. So this was our first pin by where our floss came out, our embroidery floss. So go in by the green one and out by the next one along, which is this red one. There we are. Take all three of these pins out of the way, like so. Pull your floss through. There we are. Check it's neat, and now put your needle back in where the end of that first stitch was. get the next stitch, the next pin in your line up and out the way a bit, and take your thread through to him, pull him up out the way, pull your thread through, and we're going to back stitch all the way along that line that was created by the pins. There we are. Then we're going to go all the way along in the same manner until we get to the end of our smile here, this last orange pin. I have sewn enough smile now that I just need one more stitch. So I'm going to pop my needle in, and then I'm going to bring it out by where embroidery floss very first started. There we are. Pull it through. Try to ensure by this point it might well be that your floss has sort of come apart a bit. Just going to use this to leverage it through. There we are. Nice and neat. So once you've got your floss through, you've got your two ends here, you can tie a knot and then snip these, and for our final step we are going to sew the nose, and that will keep these ends out of the way and keep them out of sight. So put your nose down like this, push more pins in all the way around the end, and I'll just show you then how to sew your nose on. This is now the very last step of making a memory bear, to sew on the nose. So carefully stitch your felt all the way around, keep your stitches nice and neat. There we are. And when we get to the top, we're just going to tie our threads off and our bear will be complete. Once you've sewn all the way around your nose felt, tie the threads off and then snip them, and your Betsy Bear is now complete. I really hope you found this video tutorial on how to make a memory bear helpful. If you have, please like this video, add a comment below. I have lots of other sewing patterns available from my website shop, which is also linked below at kutchandbloom.com. And if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. More videos will be coming soon.